Give me a big help welcoming Rich Schotten from SAP here to talk about providing the best Mac experience possible.
First, I'd like to say that I know you guys had a lot of excellent choices to choose from for this time slot, so thank you for choosing mine. Before we get started, there's two things I'd like to mention. The first is that all the slides, speakers notes, and demos are available for download from this talk, and I'll be providing a link at the end. I tend to be one of those folks who can't keep up with the speaker and take notes at the same time. So for those folks in the same situation, there's no need to take notes. Everything is going to be available at the end. Second is to please hold all questions until the end. If you got questions, make a note of them and hit me at the end of the talk. And with luck, I'll be able to answer most of your questions during the talk itself. So in 2016, Thomas Tower-Esek became the new CIO at SAP. And as part of his new role, he decided that SAP needed to provide not just a good experience for SAP's Mac using employees, but the best experience to be found anywhere. In 2016, though, we were not there. It was not awful. What it was typical. So the Mac environment was trying to replicate the Windows environment as much as possible. We had an internal-only Jamf Pro server. That meant that we could only manage Macs that were on our internal network or were connected via the VPN. As soon as a Mac left the corporate network, we were not able to manage them. We had two separate wikis, one for IT staff and one for customers, both of which required being on the internal network or needing VPN access. We had lots of pop-ups for everything. Everything was bound to AD. And our imaging process relied on installing the OS from a USB flash drive, then running a separate script that enrolled our Macs with Jamf Pro, and running policies to install software and configure the Mac settings. We had a bazillion local distribution points, which meant a synchronization lag when we were deploying new software. We did find one thing that was working well. SAP has internal communities built using Jam, which is a secure collaboration tool. The Mac at SAP Jam community was very active, and it had more than 3,000 members in 2016. So it was a natural place to hold discussions and Q&A with SAP's Mac community. And as a bonus, the Jam community is accessible from outside the SAP network, and there's even a Jam mobile app. So as a first step, the decision was made to sunset the wikis in favor of concentrating content for both the general Mac community and IT technicians into the Mac at SAP Jam site. Next, get rid of the pop-ups. Get out of our users' faces. Any future notifications should use Notification Center and be as few as possible. The decision was also made to adopt new methodologies to help us respond more quickly to our users' needs and to help us develop a more user-centric focus. So the first methodology change was to adopt Agile methods by identifying owners for the various Mac applications used at SAP and instituting a monthly cycle of identifying changes, testing them, and deploying them. We also developed new rules for the application owners to follow based on Apple's review guidelines for the Mac App Store. The major areas of concern were to make sure that all apps were 64-bit, properly signed, properly sandboxed, and not use kernel extensions. Our second methodology change was to adopt a more DevOps-like approach, where we would start to build our own custom applications so that we could solve our problems in place of waiting for our vendors to solve them. We also made our Jamf Pro server accessible to the outside internet, which allowed us to manage corporate-owned Macs as long as they had an internet connection. And to help support this, we added a Jamf Pro cloud distribution point that was hosted out in Amazon Web Services. Now, these changes were made more urgent by how the company's Mac population was growing by leaps and bounds. We also had an increasingly mobile workforce, where our laptop population was far outstripping our desktop population. So with Sierra's release now coming up, the team was focused on providing zero-day support and also relaunching the Mac at SAP experience for our Mac-using colleagues. And as part of that effort, 4 new applications were developed. Each was designed to handle certain needs we saw within the SAP Mac community. Refresh was built to be an imaging tool that anyone could use. You didn't have to wait on IT to rebuild a Mac. You just needed to have a spare machine or a colleague spare machine that you can connect to in target disk mode. Meanwhile, Assistant configured the Mac at a global level and installed all necessary software using Jamf Pro policies. Meanwhile, Assistant's job wasn't quite done yet. It also worked at the user level to help the user configure their Mac. Signature helped to solve a problem often found in companies and institutions. How do you properly set up your email signature with all the various warnings, advisories, guidance, and everything else? And the last step is one I'm actually pretty excited to discuss, as it solved a problem for us in a way that is easy for us to support and our users to use. So this tool allows our users to work as standard users most of the time because they can always request admin rights when they need them. Privileges is also a self-contained application without network dependencies, so it can be used anywhere at any time. And for our own team's use, we developed icons. So this tool creates graphics files in PNG format for use with management tools like Jamf Pro or Monkey. Icons was also the first of our publicly open sourced applications, and it was released at the Penn State Mac and Min's conference in 2017. Meanwhile, outside of the Mac platform, we are also developing tools to help us be more transparent with our colleagues. Using SAP's Fiori web application technology, we developed Apple Pies. Now, Fiori is a way to provide a better user experience for SAP applications built on our S/4HANA platform, and it allows us to build a web application which communicates with our Jamf Pro server using the API. So here's an early version of Apple Pies, which allows us to display certain information from our Jamf Pro server in an easy-to-understand format. So all information displayed is being pulled live from our Jamf Pro server, so Apple Pies is always up to date. Meanwhile, on the social media front, we revamped the Mac at SAP Jam site to help us better communicate with our Mac-using colleagues. When we hit Sierra's launch day, everything was ready. We were actually ready maybe about 3 days ahead of time. We used the Mac at SAP Jam community to let our users know that upgrading to Sierra on release day was great. We gave them clear directions on what to do to make their Macs ready to upgrade. First, go to self-service and make your Mac ready. After that, stop by the App Store and install Sierra. We used Apple Pies to show our colleagues what our Sierra adoption rate was and encourage them to upgrade if they hadn't already. By the second day of Sierra's release, we'd already seen 1,000 of our colleagues upgrade to Sierra. More importantly, our colleagues had access to the exact same data that we did, so they could see this as well. 2 months following Sierra's release, we were close to having 50% of our fleet upgraded. And this is all through people going to the App Store and running the upgrade themselves. Meanwhile, we were making changes to our Sierra build to help us become more transparent and better able to adapt to the changes that Apple was making. And the first change was to remove IT's local admin account, which helped us to accomplish 2 goals. The first was to build trust with our users, as our colleagues knew that we needed their assistance when the help desk worked on their Macs. The second was to reduce our attack surface, as an attacker would no longer be able to compromise the IT account password in order to get access to the Mac. We retained the ability to manage Macs, but it was now focused through using Jamf Pro. We also configured Jamf Pro to not set up a local management account on our Macs. The second change was to stop using Active Directory mobile accounts and transition to using local accounts. However, we still wanted to use Active Directory for Kerberos and password management, so at the same time, we began using Apple's Enterprise Connect to synchronize our local account passwords and provide Kerberos ticket management. We also made the decision that it was time to retire our existing Jamf Pro service, which was hosted on our corporate network, and set up a new Jamf Pro service that was hosted in Amazon Web Services. So why host in Amazon? Well, for us, it allowed us to take advantage of AWS's high availability services. It allowed us to make our Mac supporting services accessible by SAP employees as long as they have an internet connection. And it also allowed SAP IT to be able to manage all internet connected SAP-owned Macs. So all infrastructure related to this project uses Amazon's high availability technology, including S3, which we're using for storage, RDS, which we're using for our MySQL database hosting, Elastic Load Balancing, which we're using for load balancing and SSL termination. EC2 is providing our Tomcat server hosting, and Elasticache is providing our Memcache hosting. So what does our Jamf Pro service look like? Well, we're using a Jamf Pro clustered setup with Red Hat Enterprise Linux VMs hosted using AWS's EC2 service and a database hosted in AWS's RDS service. Multiple VMs are configured as limited access nodes, and one VM is configured as the admin console. Now, the VMs configured as limited access nodes are accessible from the internet, while the VM with access to the admin console is only accessible from the corporate network. So this is the big picture of our setup, but let's break it down into its component parts. So we use the following methods to administer our Jamf Pro service. First is, of course, we're using the Jamf Pro admin console, and the second is that we're administering our VMs in EC2 using EC2 Systems Manager. So the Jamf Pro admin console, as mentioned, is enabled on one Jamf Pro instance in our cluster, and this instance uses a separate load balancer and DNS address than the one used for client management communication. This separation allows the Jamf Pro admin console to only be accessible from the SAP network. Now, communication to the admin console uses HTTPS until it connects to the load balancer, at which point SSL is terminated and the connection passes on from there to our admin console. And that allows us to have an SSL certificate that matches that different DNS address of our load balancer. Now, AWS's Systems Manager is a free service for managing Windows and Linux instances hosted in EC2. Systems Manager's great advantage for us is that it allows us to automate our management workflows and avoid ad hoc management using SSH. So in order to use it, a Systems Manager agent has been installed on each of our instances. And these agents communicate with Systems Manager using the AWS API, which uses HTTPS to secure the communication. This communication is also internal to AWS, so it's not exposed to any outside networks. For those folks who want more information about Systems Manager, please see the link at the bottom of the screen. So to show an example of how we can automate our management workflows for EC2, here's a simple script that stops Jamf's Tomcat service. Once converted into the JSON format used by Systems Manager, I can now run this script on one or more of my Jamf Pro servers at once. This can be on demand or it can be scheduled. Now, here's another script that I've set up that's designed to check if Tomcat is running and restart it if it isn't. Now, once converted into the proper JSON format, this script can be scheduled to run on a regular schedule to make sure that Tomcat is always running when it's supposed to be. Now, I have a number of systems management documents posted to GitHub, including the ones that I just showed you, and they're available via the link shown on the screen. Now, one of my favorites is one for performing an automated installation or upgrade of Jamf Pro into a Red Hat compatible Linux distribution. Client management communication is handled by the Jamf Pro servers that have been set up as limited access nodes. Now, similar to the admin console setup, these nodes are associated with a separate load balancer and DNS address from the one used by the admin console. So communication to the Jamf Pro client management nodes also uses HTTPS until it connects to the load balancer. And that allows us to have an SSL certificate that matches that different DNS address associated with the load balancer. So if a Jamf Pro client management action requires something to be downloaded to the client, it's downloaded using HTTPS from a Jamf Pro cloud distribution point, which is hosted in S3. Now, downloads are made using signed URLs from the S3 bucket, which uses Amazon's CloudFront service to ensure that the signed URL has an expiration date. And because the URL does have that expiration date, it helps safeguard against that URL being intercepted and reused later. Hosting in S3 also allows us to not use local distribution points and use one global distribution point. Once new software is uploaded to S3, it's instantly available worldwide. Now, we use user and group information from our corporate Active Directory domain with our Jamf Pro service. So we're using Jamf's Jamf Infrastructure Manager, or JIM. So our Jamf Pro service is configured to send its AD queries to a JIM hosted in our DMZ, rather than communicating directly with the Active Directory domain. And the JIM acts as the middleman for securely passing along this query traffic, which helps to insulate our Active Directory domain from the internet. All data is stored in the domain and is accessed in a read-only way by the Jamf Pro server, using the JIM service as its intermediary. So we don't worry about caching this data or having this data stored on our Jamf Pro server. For more information about the JIM, please see the link on the screen. Now, the MySQL database used by Jamf Pro is hosted by Amazon's RDS service. Hosting in RDS allows us to be only concerned with the specific database hosting our data. Amazon is handling all the other details of hosting MySQL and backing up our database for us, as well as making that database highly available. And to comply with Jamf's recommended setup for Jamf Pro clusters, Memcache has been set up using Amazon's Elasticache service. So similar to our use case for RDS, using Elasticache means that we just need to concern ourselves with making sure that our Jamf Pro server is pointing to Elasticache for its Memcache needs. Amazon is handling all the details of making sure that Memcache is hosted properly and also making those Memcache nodes highly available. Building good infrastructure takes time, though. So the team decided that the best approach was to debut it in time for High Sierra's release. So with Sierra launched and our colleagues adopting it en masse, it was time to turn our attention to what came next, High Sierra. So as part of the development process, the decision was made in collaboration with our security folks that once a new OS was released, it would be our only supported operating system. And to help make sure that our Macs were keeping themselves up to date, the options for automatically downloading and installing macOS and security updates would also be enabled. And another change was to resolve the dilemma of giving folks admin rights or not. Our answer is to make users standard by default and also ensure that the Privileges app is installed. That means that our users run as standard users the vast majority of the time, but when they need admin rights, they can get it on demand. Meanwhile, Apple's making some changes of their own. One of them was to remove support for the target disk mode-based setup process that Refresh uses. So in its place, we decided to use internet recovery as it was Apple's supported way for installing the OS. So since Refresh is no longer installing Assistant for us, Assistant is either installed as part of a DEP-enabled setup or it's manually downloaded onto the Mac in question. So with the change to using recovery, our High Sierra setup process looked like this. So first, we go through Apple's Setup Assistant. So this should look very familiar to anyone who's pulled a Mac out of the box. Just go through, click through. And here's the one thing that when you set it up, you need to get right. You need to get the account name correct. You can set an incorrect password, you can set an incorrect full name. Everything else can be fixed later, but you need to put in the account name right. Our help desk is still working on getting that 100% of the time, but at least it's a reasonably straightforward process. And once initial setup is complete, we then use Assistant to install our software and settings. So at this point, what's going on is you would put in your asset code at this point. In this case, I'm going to use a bogus asset code, as you can see. You put in the password that you set during Setup Assistant. Once again, we can fix the user's password later, so the technician could set whatever password they wanted to use and use it here while setting up a machine. We're installing our root certificates and all other support needed to support our PKI infrastructure. And after that, enroll with Jamf Pro and start setting up the machine. So we install security software, our antivirus, and as you can see, we're including descriptions to keep the person setting up the machine or the end user fully updated on what's going on at any one time. We're installing Enterprise Connect, the apps like Privileges and Signature, Microsoft Office, printer drivers. We also install some additional software packages, which can vary over time, so we didn't get real specific there. Running system tests to make sure that everything looks okay from a system's point of view. And then here, we have the option of either restarting to continue the process, or it'll shut down automatically after a while. And the reason why it can shut down automatically is to help our technicians that are setting up machines, because they can, once they start off Assistant, they can then leave it, come back to it later. If it's off, they know they can put it in a box and ship it off to whoever needs it. But in the case you chose to restart, it'll reboot, automatically log in as that user again. And once it's up, Assistant will relaunch automatically. And this time, it's not running things at a global level, it's running things at the user level. So it checks to make sure it has a network connection, then starts asking the user some questions like where are you located, what time zone are you in? If it can guess, it will try to fill in the necessary values. This point, it pulls up what your username is. That's the only thing, like I said, that needed to be set correctly. Put in your email address, put in your password. So this is how we can help fix whatever password the technician put in. In this case, you put in your account password, and we'll set this account to use that password. Choose what your browser is, choose what your email client is, set whatever icon you want. It can pull down from Exchange. And at this point, as you can see, we have a custom doc, we have a custom background. And in the background, we've also kicked off file vault encryption. So that we change the password to match what the user's actual password is, then kick off File Vault to make sure that from the very beginning, File Vault has the correct password and everything is in sync. So along with launching support for High Sierra, we're also launching our new Amazon-based Jamf Pro service. Now, to help us avoid bringing legacy configuration over to the new infrastructure, the decision was made that this new infrastructure was going to support only Macs running High Sierra. So as part of that, our legacy Jamf Pro server would remain up for a few months in maintenance mode while we transitioned folks from Sierra and earlier to High Sierra. And once that task was accomplished, it would be retired. And I'm happy to say that we turned it off and got it fully decommissioned in March of this year. So when we hit High Sierra's launch day, everything was ready to go. And we were once again able to provide that 0-day support. We had a few issues with 10.13.0. I'm sure a lot of folks did. But overall, we were in good shape thanks to our extensive testing and development work. So we used the Mac at SAP Jamf community to let the users know that upgrading to High Sierra on release day was fully approved by IT. And we also made the upgrade process even easier, as the only thing needed was to go to Apple's App Store and install High Sierra from there. To help folks with this, we put an upgrade to High Sierra button in our self-service. Unlike the Sierra release though, all that button did was open the Mac App Store to the correct page to download and install High Sierra. Thanks to the work done during Sierra, no additional work needed to be done to make SAP Macs ready for High Sierra. And our new Jamf Pro server also launched successfully at the same time and started being popular with first hundreds and then thousands of new High Sierra Macs. We did have one casualty of our move to Amazon, though. Apple Pies was built for talking to a Jamf Pro server on our corporate network, and it took a little time to figure out how to allow it to communicate with our new cloud-based Jamf Pro server. So while we worked on getting Apple Pies back online, our High Sierra rollout continued. We implemented our shipping OS as a supported OS policy and made the announcement that as of November 27th, High Sierra was now required for all Mac users. For our folks running Sierra and earlier, we made a change to our self-service so that all they could see were the options to upgrade and an explanation of why they couldn't see anything else. So for those who remember, our announcing that High Sierra was required on the 27th had some unfortunate timing. This showed up on the 28th. However, thanks to our social media efforts, we were able to get the word out quickly to our colleagues about what to do about this issue. And we also continued ahead with having High Sierra as our only supported OS. So that policy served us well, along with the decision to enable auto updates for Apple software when the existence of Meltdown and Spectre were announced. So Apple released updates for High Sierra first, which meant that our Macs were well on the way to being remediated, while other organizations needed to wait and see if Apple was going to release updates for Sierra and El Capitan. Now, to aid us with our social media efforts, at this time we also introduced our new spokes emoji, Hana Fiori. How many people have ever heard the term spokes emoji before? All right, new word. Now, she is named for SAP's Hana and Fiori platforms, and Hana Fiori now shows up in many Mac at SAP official communications. So Hana helps keep us fun and also helps grab the attention of our colleagues. And so far, she's doing a pretty good job on both counts. She even has her own Twitter feed. We also fixed Apple Pies, which meant that our Mac using colleagues could once again see how the adoption of the new OS was going. Despite High Sierra's issues, our adoption rate was going up even faster than it had been for Sierra. We were also discovering that our earlier design decisions allowed us to dodge some bullets that were causing some headaches for other organizations. Now, one such had to do with the new account attribute called a secure token. So on High Sierra APFS boot drives, a secure token must be added to any account which is being enabled for FileVault. So in order to provide a secure token to a user account, the account you're using needs to have a secure token as well. So if no user account on the Mac has a secure token, then the first user account to log in is granted a secure token. And this will occur either at the account's creation or when you're turning on FileVault. Now, thanks to our now standard practice of using local users created by Apple's GUI tools and only setting up an account for the Mac's primary user, we were now following Apple's consumer model for account creation. And based on our observation of how secure token works, the consumer model is the one that has the least problems with secure token management. And in turn, that has meant that we have had minimal issues with enabling FileVault on High Sierra. I'm not going to say we have no issues, minimal issues. And another issue was how to deal with imaging. Apple's introduction of Apple file system boot drives also introduced confusion as to whether or not Apple still supported traditional ASR-based imaging at all. But now that we were using Apple's recovery as the way to install the OS, with the system providing setup and configuration as a post-install action, we didn't have to care about what was going on with imaging. By using recovery, we were now following Apple's consumer model for OS installation. As with Secure Token, our observation has been that the consumer model is the one where Apple focuses its attention and its testing. We did have issues with user-approved kernel extension loading, but even there, we'd started to address this issue a while ago. So as part of our existing guidelines for internally built applications, we had rules forbidding the use of kernel extensions. These guidelines also applied when evaluating third-party solutions which use kernel extensions. So while we were not able to be 100% kernel extension free when High Sierra launched, our vendors which use kernel extensions heard about it from us as an important issue that may cause us to take our business elsewhere. From 10.13.0 through 10.13.3, we leveraged Apple's design decision to have MDM disable user approval for kernel extensions. For 10.13.4 or later, we deployed a whitelist profile with the option for users to approve the loading of kernel extensions. All the while, we're engaging with our vendors to let them know two things. The first is that we would not be buying or approving any new tools that needed kernel extensions. The second is that we would be actively looking at alternatives to their products that did not need kernel extensions. Another area of concern was 32-bit applications. This was another area where we were able to apply our guidelines when evaluating third-party solutions. We're not 100% 32-bit free yet, but we are working to get there. So, as we all know, being a Mac admin is a job that doesn't sit still. So what are we up to now? Well, we recently welcomed the 9,000th member of our Mac at SAP online community. We began our support for Mojave on release day. And as part of rolling out Mojave support, we also redeveloped our new machine setup process for non-DEP Macs to add user-initiated enrollment to the process and also include a new assistant app named Apple at SAP. And the reason why the change from assistant is that we have an Apple at SAP app for all of our supported platforms, which I'll be going into a little more later. The new enrollment workflow ensures that our Macs have user-approved MDM enrollment from the very start. So for Mojave, our setup process differs from High Sierra at the point after we go through Apple's setup assistant. So at this point, for our non-DEP setups, what would need to happen is someone would need to launch a web browser, go to our Jamf Pro server, log in with their credentials. And this is where the technician can log in with their own credentials. It doesn't matter for the Macs. Jamf Pro is already set up for High Sierra and later to provide an MDM-based enrollment process. We go through, we install, provide our admin credentials where needed. At this point, we have user-approved MDM, and our profiles, like privacy settings, and the system extension whitelist profiles begin to apply almost immediately. Another thing is that our Apple at SAP setup app is pushed by Jamf Pro and shows up in our dock. The rest of the process should look pretty familiar. Once again, we're putting in our asset code, putting in our password. Again, we're installing our certificates, installing our security software, installing software updates. One feature that I didn't cover before is that if we have software updates that require a restart, Apple at SAP is smart enough to reboot the Mac and come back to where it left off to finish the installation process. So at this point, it's finishing up on installation. Installation is finished up. And again, there's this auto login for the user. Apple at SAP launches at the user level. We put in our password. And again, we're choosing what's our preferred email application and web browser. Briefly, Chrome got dropped from the setup workflow, which is why it's missing there, but it's back now. So you do, once again, have a choice. Again, custom background, custom doc. Because we have UAMDM set up from the very get-go, there's no pop-ups warning you about kernel extensions. There's no pop-ups warning you about privacy issues popping up. So you should be ready to go and able to start working. Also, FileVault is kicking off in the background. So within 4 days of release day, over 10% of our Mac users had upgraded to Mojave. As of today, I took these numbers earlier this morning, over 30% of our Mac users have upgraded to Mojave. Our team has also received some more responsibilities. We started 2018 as the Mac CoE team. We are now the Apple CoE team. Our responsibilities for managing SAP's Macs haven't changed, and now we'll be managing these other Apple devices as well. Jamf Pro continues to be our choice of management tool, so we are now managing our macOS and tvOS population exclusively with Jamf Pro, and we are migrating our iOS management to Jamf Pro as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to my teammate Hannah for a few words on iOS and tvOS.
It has never been simpler to set up your new iPhone from SAP. To do so, turn on your iPhone. Choose your preferred language and connect to the Wi-Fi. Select Setup as a new iPhone. Tap Next. Enter your SAP credentials and tap Next. Tap Enable Location Services and get started. Wait for the notification to choose your code to be able to unlock the screen. Open the Apple at SAP app to enable single sign-on for easier access to all the company apps and sites. If you want to install other apps, go to Self-Service to download more. Go to the Community app to check out the iPhone iPad at SAP Jam page. Have fun with your new iPhone.
And now for a few words on tvOS.
Hi, I'm here to explain how you set up your Apple TV. At first, connect your Apple TV to the Ethernet cable in your office. Power on the TV. Don't press anything while you wait for the remote to connect. Choose Continue. Go to the Apple at SAP app. Enter a name for the TV. Add your location. To skip locking your Apple TV in conference room display mode, select No. Choose Yes to install the SAP in-house apps. To lock your Apple TV in a conference room mode without the option to use any apps, go back to the Apple at SAP app and choose Yes to the conference room display. That's all. It is easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
And last but not least, we open sourced our Privileges app this summer, and it is available for download from GitHub. Along with the application itself, we have posted a sample launch agent that allows an admin user to be automatically changed to a standard user on login. And auto package recipes are also available for it, so you can start incorporating it into your workflows as soon as you would like. And with that, here is how you get it all. PDF is available from the link on the top. Keynote slides, which include the movies, the presenter's notes, the everything I've been talking about, are available via the link below. And with that, I'm going to leave that up on the screen. And how are we doing on time?
A couple questions.
Okay, a couple questions.
Hey, Rich, thanks a lot. I've got several questions. I'm only going to ask two. One is, can you share what AV or endpoint protection you guys use at SAP?
We are currently using McAfee.
Okay, thank you. And I understand the concept behind standard users elevating using the app, but are you recording those through a log file, or like how are you tracking? Like,
Unfortunately, I can't really comment on that.
Okay, but you are tracking.
I can't really comment on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just wondering, with File Vault enabled and no local IT account on the machine, have you run into any issues as far as when employees leave and basically not having access to anything on the machine?
We have Jamf Pro set up for File Vault recovery key escrow, so that's what we're using.
Okay.
Thanks for everything, by the way. My boss thinks I'm way smarter than I really am because of everything that you provide, so appreciate that. I've got a couple of fairly low-tech questions to ask. Beginning, you had mentioned that you're no longer doing pop-ups, you're just using notifications.
Yes.
How have you found that that's worked out? Are users actually really noticing those? From my perspective, I haven't really seen that.
So far, I mean, we haven't had, I will say we've had far fewer complaints about getting in our users' faces. It's going to be one of those things that some users are going to respond to it and some users aren't. By and large, it's worked for us. Past that, your mileage may vary.
And when you made the choice to do 0-day support for the Mac OS releases, how did you deal with any potential conflicts with third-party apps? Did you just kick them to the curb? Did you say they just won't work until later? What was your path there?
So during the summer, as part of the release cycle, we engaged with our vendors and made it very clear that it was very important that we had a High Sierra or Mojave or what have you compatible version, or it would not be deployed. So that is a decision that our team has the autonomy and authority to make. Of course, we could be overruled by high enough in the managerial chain. But by and large, that's how we handle it, is that if you're not ready, we don't ship you.
All right. Thank you.
Hi there. What's kind of the approach that you take with beta testing and doing all that with your team for upcoming releases? Like, how do you get that through QA? What are some of the things that you want them to be doing to make that 0-day successful?
So for that, we have I had discussed earlier how we have a release train set up where it's a monthly cycle of testing apps, making sure they work. We also apply that for pre-release OSs. So we have during the summer, we had a 10.14 release train set up where we were testing against the betas and making sure that our software worked.
Do you have employees partake in that, or is that strictly limited to your Mac?
So for our release train testing, that is limited to our application owners and also to the Apple CoE team.
Okay.
And the idea there is that the app owners are the ones responsible for the ones making sure this works. If it doesn't work, the Apple CoE team will push this back to the app owners and say, you need to fix this. This is your responsibility.
And lastly, if you're not ready for a release, how do you go about preventing people from getting like Mojave, for example?
We don't.
You don't? Okay.
We will be ready.
Okay.
That is, I mean, that's one of those things. If we have software that's not ready for a new upcoming OS release, then that's it for that software. Unless it is something, once again, that gets high enough on the managerial chain that it comes down to us, you will figure out what to do about this software. We'll just say, no, that's not, we're just not going to deploy it.
So if that software that you're using isn't ready, do these vendors provide you like an early release of whatever it is, and you guys are on the alpha or beta train, or are they actually releasing, hey, SAP wanted this, so we're going to give you guys?
We want the finished product before release day.
Okay.
And by and large, I would say that we're a large enough company to have the cloud to make that stick.
All right. Thank you.
We got time for 2 more questions here. 2 more.
Hi, thanks again for all your contributions to the Mac community. There are 2 things that make our Apple team drop everything that they're doing: priority 1 escalations and a new post on Dare Flounder. I just have a couple of questions about using local accounts as opposed to doing the managed mobile. I'm just curious, what went behind the decision-making process to do that, and how are you managing password synchronization with those local accounts?
So I'll take that in reverse order. So we're using Enterprise Connect to talk back to our AD domain and see what the password is. And that gets fed back into a dialog box to say, hey, your password changed on the AD domain. It needs to be updated on your Mac here as well. And the reason for driving the move to local accounts is frankly, they're just more reliable. They're easier to work with. And once again, going back to following Apple's consumer model, Apple's testing that. I'm not convinced they're doing a whole lot of testing with mobile accounts.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Just real quick about the privilege app. How do you stop your users from abusing that? Is there like a mechanism that like it only happens once a day? They can only activate that once a day or multiple times a day or infinite times?
We treat our users like adults and we trust them to use a tool responsibly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that's going to do it, guys. If you want to stick around, we get another session here in 30 minutes about scaling Jamf Pro for high availability. Otherwise, let's get one other big round of applause for Rich.